Hello! You have known different types of exercises and activities that teacher can apply in a language class. In this video, we are going to look briefly at characteristics of good practice activities and then focus on analyzing some samples activities to see whether they are considered good or not. Now, let's start. First, let's review some features of good practice activity. Before watching this video, you should read the extract in Read 3 in order to understand these features. If you haven't, please pause the video and finish the reading. If you haven't, please pause the video and finish the reading. If you have, just continue. I only briefly summarize the features so that we can focus on the sample analysis in the next part. Alright, here are 7 key features of an effective practice activity according to O 2009. The first feature is validity. Validity requires that an activity must focus on the skill that it purports to practice. In other words, a speaking activity must primarily focus on students talking instead of listening to teacher or listening to the tape. The second feature, pre-learning. This requires that students should understand the language they are required to practice. Otherwise, they will not be able to do the task or produce unsuccessful responses. Thirdly, it is volume. Volume refers to the amount of time students engage with language practice in an activity. The more language they engage, the more practice they will get. In other words, if students have to spend time for other reasons like classroom management, using mother tongue, or other distraction rather than working with the language, that time is wasted. The more time is wasted, the less effective an activity may become. So, there should be a lot of repetition of the target forms or skills to be practiced. Number 4. Success orientation. This requires teachers to select, design, and administer practice activities in such a way that learners are likely to succeed in doing the task. To put it simple, the activities should be suitable to students' level, and they are able to do it, produce generally acceptable utterance. Or in other words, the activity should give students a little challenge instead of too much challenge. The fifth feature. This feature states that an activity provides opportunities for useful practice to all or most of the students in the class. It aims at the majority of students to get the benefits out of the activity. Now, coming to the next feature. This feature states that an activity provides opportunities for useful practice to all or most of the different levels in the class. It aims at the majority of students to get benefits out of the activity. The next feature involves teacher assistance. This feature makes it clear that during an activity, teachers should provide enough help to get student success in doing the task and increase the effectiveness of the practice activity. The last characteristic should be interest. It means that an activity should be of students' interest. This may be created via an interesting topic, a game-like fun talks, attention-catching materials, etc. So, with all 7 characteristics in mind, now let's assess some samples of language practice activities to check their effectiveness. These activities and analysis are taken from a chapter in the book of Penny 2009 entitled A Course in Language Teaching. I find that his analysis is really reasonable, and he provides a lot of food in thoughts in those sample analyses. So, I'm sharing with you now. For each scenario below, let's read carefully to understand what teacher does in each activity. Then think about 4 questions below. Question 1. What is the apparent goal of the practice activity? Number 2. How far is the goal achieved? Number 3. What are the factors that make it effective or ineffective? And the last question, if you could redesign the material or offer advice to the teacher, what would you suggest? The first scenario is an activity to practice spelling. Just read the scenario and think about the questions. In this scenario, things go like this. The teacher writes 7 dashes on the board and invites the students to guess what letters they represent. They start guessing letters. Student 1 say E. Teacher, no. And then she write E on the board and a baseline indicating the foot of a gallows. Student 2 say A. Teacher, write and fits in A on the second to last dash. The next student say S. Teacher say no and write up S, draws a vertical line in the gallows drawing. And so on. After a minute or so of guessing, the class arrives at the word junior. The word is written up in full on the board. It is then erased, and the teacher or student thinks of another word, marks off the corresponding number of dashes, and the guessing process is repeated. Alright, what do you think about the activity? Have you had answers for the guiding questions? Okay, you may realize that this is a spelling activity, hangman. You may be familiar with this and have used it in your class. The goal of this activity is to practice the spelling of the word junior. However, according to Pennier, this activity is not effective as it lacks validity and volume. In other words, it does not aim mainly at practicing spelling, because what students do most of the time is random guessing of letters. The actual practice with word spelling only comes in a few seconds at the end. This activity wasted a lot of time, valuable time, on guessing. All says that this is an interesting activity for both learners and teachers, but it has little learning value, and it is only functioned as a fun time killer. He suggests that, in order to practice spelling activity, teacher can write a set of words with problematic spelling on the board. Students then have around a minute to study the words and its spelling. Then teacher raps out the words and students write out words from their memory. Teacher could make this activity more engaging by involving some competitive elements like group work, awarding points for correct spelling, or time pressure. Next, Pennier discusses a lesson teaching grammar. Let's read the scenario and think about the 4 questions. The activity goes like this. The teacher writes on the board a sentence that describes a present situation. Tom is looking in all his pockets, but he cannot find his keys. And then the word lose. She asks the student to suggest a sentence in present perfect tense that describes what has happened to produce this situation. Students use the verb in brackets at the end. A student volunteers to say, Tom has lost his keys. The teacher approves this answer and writes up a second similar sentence. The Browns live in that house on the corner, but they are not there at the moment, and then they would go away. Another student volunteers the answer. This time, it is wrong, and the teacher asks someone else who produces a correct answer. The teacher continues the same process with another 4 similar sentences. Alright, as you can see, this activity aims at practicing present perfect. In Earth's opinion, the target language is not effectively practiced, as most of the time is spent on writing on the board and reading sentences. The actual time spent on practice with present perfect is much less. And one more thing, teacher provides mechanical practice because there is only one correct answer, allowing no variety of responses at all. This also makes the lesson boring. He suggests giving students a series of exclamations like, "Oh, thank you," or "Congratulations," and invites students to talk about what has happened. Such exercise will allow more time for present perfect practice and more advanced language use. Lastly, Peniel discusses a lesson involving vocabulary teaching. Let's read the scenario and think about the 4 questions. Here's the situation. Teacher asks, who knows the meaning of the word disappointment? There are puzzled looks. A student hesitantly puts up his hand. Yes. And students say, write a point. Teacher, no. Anyone else? There's silence. Come on, think everybody. Try again. Student 2 say, lose a point. Teacher, no, it has nothing to do with points. Try again. It has something to do with feelings. After another few guesses, the last of which, after broad hints from the teacher, comes fairly near, the teacher finally gives the correct definition. Okay, so let's come to the analysis. You may agree that although, in the end, the definition of the word is given, this is not a good way of dealing with vocabulary. For one thing, teacher wastes a minute or 2 asking students to guess, but they fail. This contradicts to the feature of success orientation, as stated, it is failure-oriented, because it gives students an unpleasant and embarrassing feeling of failure and they constantly get it wrong. Moreover, this also lacks validity because the act of just guessing adds nothing to the knowledge of the word. It failed to give much real practice in the target item. In addition, this activity lacks teacher assistance too, because teacher lets the students to think and try on their own without providing any kind of necessary support. So, our suggestion is that teachers should reteach or give students chances to practice through contextualized sentences and situations which contains repeated use of the words. For example, teacher may give a clue with a sentence like, I felt really disappointed when, and then provides different completed versions. Through these example sentences, students can draw out the meaning of the word successfully. So, we have just looked at 7 key features of an effective language practice and look at 3 sample analyses of Peniel. I hope that this video provides you with practical experience when you select or design your own activity for your class.